A Tale of Two Parties by Scott Mason. Former Vice President Dick Cheney made a surprise appearance this past week at CPAC, the yearly conservative convention in Washington, D.C. When his daughter Liz brought him out unexpectedly, he was received with a standing ovation. "A welcome like that is almost enough to want to make me run for office again," said Cheney, who then added that he still wasn't going to. Well, thank God. Cheney later added, quote, "I think 2010 is going to be a phenomenal year for the conservative cause," end quote. Okay, but what exactly does he mean by the conservative cause? Does he mean continuing to spend billions of dollars on never-ending nation-building exercises in the Middle East while destroying civil liberties here at home? Does he mean racking up record deficits? How about bailing out failing companies with taxpayer money? Increased government health care entitlements? Or how about spending more money we don't have by borrowing it from foreign countries or printing it out of thin air like it's monopoly money? Because that's the conservatism Cheney and his old boss engaged in for 8 years. We don't need more of that. Hell, we already have plenty of it going on right now, courtesy of our current president, who by those standards is conservative too. Perhaps he meant a different kind of conservatism, the type championed by the only other CPAC speaker whose reaction rivaled that of Cheney's, Texas Congressman Ron Paul. Said Paul of his brand of conservatism, quote, "There's nothing wrong with describing conservatism as protecting the Constitution, protecting all things that limit government. Government is the enemy of liberty. Government should be very restrained. And as I have said many times, it's time that we do study and understand from a conservative viewpoint how much we should be engaged around the world. We as conservatives, too many, have taken this saying that we are responsible, but that is a neoconservative viewpoint and not true conservatism," end quote. That line, like Cheney's, drew a huge applause, which again left me wondering just who fuels the conservative movement. Is it the faction who cheered for Ron Paul or the one that cheered for Dick Cheney? The members of the crowd who applauded former Congressman Bob Barr's assertion that waterboarding is torture, or the boo-birds who tried to drown the sound of Barr's voice out? The crowd that cheered Students for Liberty's Alex McCoben's praise of CPAC for including the gay conservative group Go Pride, or the ones who booed and silently agreed with the anti-Go Pride sentiments of California conservative activist Ryan Sorba? Well, if the CPAC straw poll was any indication, it looks like the tide may be turning in favor of liberty. With 31% of the vote, Ron Paul surprisingly took first place over Mitt Romney and Sarah Palin, who finished a distant third. Establishment conservatives are already falling all over themselves, writing the straw poll result off as meaningless. Said iconic conservative talk radio host Rush Limbaugh, quote, "All I'll tell you is that any organization that has a straw poll vote on who the party presidential candidate ought to be and comes up with Ron Paul is not an organization of conservatives. I just tell you, something's haywire there," end quote. Of course, as Brad Osoba pointed out elsewhere on this site, the reactions of Rush and others were a bit different when Mitt Romney won the past 3 years. And as Brad also pointed out, we'd be foolish not to look a little deeper into the results. Of the 10,000 CPAC attendees, 65% were under the age of 30. And according to the Fox News channel, 48% of the 2,395 participants in the straw poll identified themselves as students. In other words, there was a large turnout among the future generation of conservative voters, and they spoke loudly. As the aforementioned Alex McCoben of Students for Liberty put it, quote, "The typical student's response is to be socially tolerant and fiscally responsible. Freedom does not come in pieces. It is a single concept that we must defend at all times," end quote. That sure sounds like an endorsement of the policies of Ron Paul and a rejection of the neoconservative policies of the 8 years of the Bush presidency. Now, all of that said, as I've stated in previous commentaries, I don't think Ron Paul is a realistic presidential candidate at this point, simply because by the time 2012 comes around, he will be 77 years old. Perhaps the Liberty torch will be passed to former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, or, looking a little farther down the line, Ron Paul's son Rand. But regardless of who it is, the fact remains that Ron Paul is popular not for who he is, but for the ideas he represents. The concept of across-the-board liberty, which is popular with young people. The GOP establishment can kick and scream about that all they want, but that won't stop it from being true. So the choice for them becomes, do they embrace the youth movement and incorporate the classic freedom-based conservatism of Ron Paul, or do they stay the neoconservative course set forth by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney? The latter would most certainly further disenfranchise the youth that turned out overwhelmingly in 2008 for Barack Obama. The former, on the other hand, could lead to a real long-term push for the kind of liberty that the founders envisioned when they first drafted the Constitution. Let's hope they make the right choice. The future of the Republic depends on it.